721, let's check in. I bet this is Mark Ronchetti on the phone. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Gene. How are you?
I'm taking a big chance, The phone rings, I answer, I put it on the air.
You're a man who takes... You're not afraid of intrigue. There's no question about that.
Well, how you doing?
I'm good. We're bouncing all over the state and actually headed to Artesia this morning, a little later on. And so we're excited to be there. We're going to be over at Matador at 11. Talking to people there. So we'd love anyone who wants to come by to say hello, but we're just kind of making our final swing through the state at the end of the primary cycle here.
That's right. Tuesday is the actual election day, although early voting has been going on for a couple of weeks now. Have you gotten any kind of sense as to what is happening with the early voting? Have you been able to determine are people coming out to vote? Are more Republicans turning out than Democrats? What have you in your campaign been able to learn from the early voting?
Yeah, we've seen some pretty good numbers so far. There's no doubt. We've heard from the Secretary of State that Republican numbers are up as compared to where Democrats are. And obviously they have more registered voters in the state than we do. So we may end up seeing a few more Democrats vote than Republicans. But as a percentage of where things sit, there's no question. I think the voter interest is really strong on the Republican side. And what we're seeing is people more and more, and Gene, I think you see this in Artesia too, as you get closer and closer to Saturday, the last day of early voting, you see people really ramp up in how often they're voting, and we're seeing that too. So you start the first weekend, you get a few people that show up, and then more and more we're seeing people show up. And I think there's an incredible amount of interest on the Republican side on this election, making sure that we get a new governor.
No question about that. And I think for a lot of Republicans, there's some great candidates that are in the governor's race. There's 5 people on the at least on my sample ballot, and I think for a lot of Republicans, it's kind of a which one do you pick, because they're all good candidates. So do you find that a lot of people are trying to not think of it as this is the candidate I really want to get behind, but which candidate they think can beat Governor Grisham in the general election? Do you hear some of that as you're talking to folks on the campaign trail?
Yeah, I think you do hear that more than probably in past years. That's one of the things that we talk a lot about and we hear from people is the opportunity to beat this governor. I think that when you look at where we are and how she's acted, the governor meaning toward our campaign, I think it's obvious she's not looking forward to running against us, and that's one of the things that we talk to people all the time about. And I think there's also, a sense that when you have an opportunity like this, we need to make sure we get it right. We need to make sure we get a candidate who can beat her and ends up talking about the issues that are important to the people of the state of New Mexico, and we don't get sidetracked on things that they could hurt our chances to win. So I think that's one of the things and one of the points we've been making is coming off the Senate race and then in this race, knowing that there's just a real opportunity of a conservative movement that's being built in this state because of what this governor has done, because of what she's done with oil and gas, because of what she's done with the economy, because of what she's done with our schools. You look at so many different areas where not only the governor but the legislature has taken us off on the wrong track. We have to get this right and make sure we nominate someone who's going to beat Michelle Lujan Grisham, and we're definitely that campaign.
Now, in this part of the state, obviously we're oil and gas, and you're going to talk to people that are oil and gas, and you're going to hear from oil and gas people on what the state needs to do to help support the industry. But is that message or that concern over the oil and gas industry, are people outside of this part of the state even aware of that and how that can damage if the oil and gas industry continues to be damaged by this governor, how it can affect state finances and state government? I mean, outside of this corner of the state, do people even know the oil and gas exists, or what's their opinion of the oil and gas industry in New Mexico?
You know what's interesting is I think when you talk about the industry as a whole and what it means to people and what it means to government, I think what it means to government is less important to them than what it means to themselves when they go up and they fill up with gas and it's $4.75 a gallon. You start seeing what these issues are. You see what the Biden administration did. You see what Michelle Lujan Grisham has done. And really the way I describe what she's done is death by 1,000 cuts. She does little things to our oil and gas industry slowly along the way to try to slow them down, to make their lives more difficult, to make it more expensive to operate. These are all things that she does. And then when you talk to people who don't have involvement in oil and gas, what they're starting to see is when they go and it affects them and they go to fill up their tank with gas, they see what the repercussions are from terrible policy. And all of this has sort of happened at once, whether you talk about gas prices or whether you talk about inflation. All of this is killing middle-income and low-income New Mexicans. And so I think there's a real understanding and a real willingness now from people across the state to say, wait a minute, we have the best industry in the world here. Why in the world are we not empowering them to help bring gas prices down, to help bring inflation down, but yet we're not, thanks to the Biden administration and thanks to this governor. So I think where we are right now is a unique opportunity, Gene, where sometimes you didn't always have that chance to make the case for oil and gas, but I definitely think we do now.
Well, that would be great, because people in this part of the state have been trying to make that message known to the legislators and the people around the state for years, and hopefully that will be successful. I have to ask you this, being a media person, you've done some debates, but then you've also been on the campaign trail and you've been out talking to folks, real people, maybe even viewers of yours that watched you when you were on television. When the television debates happen and the questions and the topics and how those are done, are the topics and the questions in line with what you hear from the general public when you go out on the campaign trail, or are there some differences between the two camps?
There are some differences. There are a couple that were interesting. And if you're referring to the Channel 7 debate, what was interesting about that was the topic I actually really like and have spent some time on, and that is that we were talking about cloud seeding. They asked a question about cloud seeding. And I have to be honest, we've talked about it to some degree in some circles around the state, but that's not the top of everyone's mind when they start talking about the issues that we face. And I love it. You know, it plays right into meteorology, and it's something that could help the state on the edges to get a little more moisture. But it was interesting to hear. But I will say, for the most part, I think, yes, you hear the same topics. But what's interesting, Gene, is as we've gotten closer to this primary, and I think as we head throughout the summer, what's starting to happen here is initially we had crime and the border were sort of at the top of the list. And those are still very important. There's no question. But economy now is taken over, just because we're seeing kind of the tight grip of inflation and high fuel prices, that's starting to dominate everything that we're talking about. And so therefore, on the forefront of that, people start to ask, what are we going to do to make New Mexico a better place and an easier place to do business? So those tend to be the things we talk about in most debates and in most rooms that we go to. Those are the topics that are important.
Well, that's good, because you'd like to think that the folks in the media are paying attention to what's going on in the state and are reflective of that in the debates. At least that's what we've tried to do here whenever we've done our city council debates and stuff like that. So you're headed down to southeast New Mexico. You're going to be in Artesia. Where are you going to be later today?
We'll be at Matador at 11 o'clock today. Matador
at 11 o'clock. Public can come out and ask questions, and I'm sure they've got a lot of questions for you on that. One last question, Mark. With the campaign being as tough as it is, any campaign primary or whatever is always tough. Do you see the Republican Party and the candidates that are all running, all five of you, do you see whoever the winner is? I know you plan on being the winner, but do you see the candidates all coalescing behind the winner and being unified when we go up against the governor in the fall?
I do. I think, look, you're right. Primaries are hard, but sometimes you have to point out contrasts and differences between the candidates, and that's part of how this process goes. But I think when you really look at what we have to do to make sure we get the change this state needs, I think we're going to get everybody pulling in the same direction, no matter what happens on Tuesday, because it's so critical for this state to see that change. And so we're optimistic that that's absolutely going to happen. And I can tell you this much, we're going to be supportive of whoever the nominee is. And when we think that'll be us, there's definitely hope for that. We need everyone and everybody to get out and vote. It is absolutely critical, because I think we do need to send a message to, especially the governor in this state, that, look, there's going to be some change coming here because of the way she's operated. And the only way we can get that done is if we're all pulling in the same direction.
Well, if there's a lot of Republicans, I mean, if you add up the total numbers of all the candidates, all the Republican votes in this primary, that needs to be a huge number, because you're exactly right. Then the governor and her people are going to look at that and go, we really do have a problem here with what they think about us. So you're right. The turnout is very important in this primary, even though it's just a couple of things on the ballot, the governor and the lieutenant governor. So, well, very good. Is there anything else you want to share with the folks this morning, Mark?
No, Gene, I appreciate it. Always enjoy talking to you, and hopefully we'll catch up with you coming up, in the next couple of weeks here as we continue down the road. But just would encourage everybody in Artesia and Eddy County in general to get out and vote, and let's get this done. All
right. Mark Ronchetti, he'll be at Matador today at 11 in Artesia. Go by and visit with him. Mark, as always, thank you so much, and good luck. Stay safe.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. We'll see you. All right. We're going to take a quick break.